Thank you so much for coming here today. My name is Beatrice Atenka, and I am the chair for the John Muller Anderson Lecture Series in the School of Visual Arts. And so, in this capacity, I help with my other colleagues in events and awards committee members to schedule this artist series. And this is also a wonderful space that has been prepared for us by the help of Lauren. And so I would like to thank Lauren for giving us the space and making us feel comfortable to listen to this lecture. A little bit history, thank you for the clap. A little bit history about John Muller Anderson Lecture Series. Dr. John Muller Anderson, Professor Emeritus, was the Ivan Pooh Research Professor of Philosophy and the first director of Penn State Institute of Art and Humanities. His passion for the philosophy of art and painting resulted in his generous gift from which we as a community has greatly benefited. The John Muller Anderson Endowment in Visual Arts was established in 2001 with the purpose of supporting outstanding programming, such as this lecture and other related activities with guest artists, which we bring into our campus to help engage with students, the community, and faculty as a whole. All Anderson events are free of charge and they are open to the public. So please, next time you come around, come with someone, an extra person. I would like to thank the former director of the School of Visual Arts, Wagner Mendoka Whitehead, the interim director, Eduardo Navas, and my SOFA colleagues in the Events and Award Committee, who have and continue to greatly contribute to the smooth and successful carrying out of this series, which we would be experiencing. We still have 3 more, so plan to join. I now want to invite onto the podium, which is already here, Michelle Hinojosa, an assistant professor in painting area here in the School of Visual Art, Penn State, who would introduce our guest artist for the day, Rico Gatson. Thank you. With an applause, let's welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Hinojosa, and I'm a faculty member here at Penn State, like you said. So thank you all for being here. It's my pleasure today to introduce Rico Gatson. Rico Gatson is a multimedia visual artist whose work explores themes of history, identity, popular culture, and spirituality through sculpture, painting, video, and public art. Over the course of almost 2 decades, he has been celebrated for politically layered artworks, often based on significant moments in Black history. From the Watts riots, the formation of the Black Panthers, to the election of President Barack Obama, are a few of the subjects touched upon in his work. His work has been exhibited nationally and internationally, including exhibitions at the Contemporary Art Museum at the University of South Florida, the Studio Museum in Harlem, New York, the Whitney Museum of American Art, New York, the Essel Museum in Austria, Vienna, and the Smithsonian American Art Museum in Washington, D.C. In 2019, he completed a commission for the MTA Arts and Design titled Beacons, 8 permanent large-scale mosaic portraits of prominent individuals associated with the Bronx, installed at the 167th Street subway station on the Grand Concourse. Recently, he completed a site-specific installation at New York Penn Station, which engages with the movement and energy of the station using shifting planes of color and geometric abstraction to create a sense of rhythm and flow. The installation transformed the space into an immersive environment echoing the layered motion of commuters while offering a moment of reflection within the busy urban space. His work is featured in numerous private collections and the permanent collections of the Smithsonian American Art Museum, the National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Denver Art Museum, the Cheekwood Museum, the Kempner Museum, and the Yale University Art Museum, among many others. Rico's work is shown regularly at the Miles McEnery Gallery in Chelsea and was recently on view with the gallery in the Armory Show in New York City. Gatson is a faculty member at the School of Visual Arts and New York University and lives and works in Brooklyn, New York. I first met Rico one summer at Anderson Ranch Artist Residency, where he became a mentor and friend. At a time when I was on the verge of dropping out of grad school It was Rico who talked me off the ledge, offering wisdom and encouragement that continues to resonate with me today. His generosity and insight are as much a part of his practice as his powerful visual work. Please join me in welcoming the incredible artist Rico Gatson.
Hi. Uh, I'm really excited to be here. Um, Thanks for that wonderful introduction, Beatrice and Michelle, and for inviting me to come share my work. Uh, I'm really excited to do that. I'm always jump at the opportunity to share my work, especially with students. So um, I'm so yeah. Suffice to say, I'm happy to be here. It might start off a little slow and build. I'm going to talk through about. I suppose the selection of work goes back a few years, but I'd like to start with um, inspiration, as described in the first image. But I also want to add a little background. I'm originally was born in Augusta, Georgia, and but my family moved to California when I was really young. Um, and so I grew up in Riverside, California. And then made my way across the country to the Midwest, where I did my undergraduate study at then um, a school called Bethel College, but it's now Bethel University. And then I went on to get my MFA in sculpture from Yale. So I like to say that I'm a sculptor first, um, who paints second. That's a longer convoluted story that I'm not going to get into here. But I will invite you, if you're curious, to reserve questions regarding that and or anything else that I say that I don't completely um, explain during the Q&A session. Hopefully you'll have questions then. All right. But I started out, uh, I should say, uh, studying graphic design. I was always like an artist. I was always making art from as far back as I can remember. In fact, my mom likes to pull out a picture that I made when I was fairly young, maybe 7 or 8. She's really proud of and still owns. She owns my first artwork. So, and but it was of a gorilla, and I guess she was impressed with um, the, the fact that I could produce something. Um, I don't have an image of that, but but that I could produce something that she found to be really impressive. And I guess I share that story because that's like the first story of somebody like reacting or responding to like work in a way that sort of propelled me into this profession, if one can call it that, of art. But that really sticks. It really stayed. And I love my mom. She's an amazing human. And that support is pretty special. And I would say that that image is still consistent, or aspects of that image are still consistent in the work that I'm producing now. All right. So are we, yeah, maybe. Oh, yeah. I'm not used to using PCs. Beautiful. All right. So again, inspiration. So I'm going to talk through these images fairly quickly, but I like to include stuff that inspires me, uh, work that I think about, that I go back to, that sort of uh, helps me to think about what it is that I want to do. So this first image is of Hilma of Klint, who was a Swiss um, artist, and speaking off the top of my head, produced work that was considered some of the that predates early abstraction, but there was also um, produced work that was somewhat inspired by um, her interest in spirituality, um, and more specifically felt that she was a conduit for um, you know energy beyond, and sort of produced um, work based upon that, uh, the fact that she thought of herself as a conduit. Um, I've referred to myself that way. Again, we can try to unpack some of that as hopefully you become more interested in what I'm showing and we're talking about. Uh, Emma Kunst was an artist that I first became aware of when I experienced the exhibition of the Swiss artist Thomas Hirschhorn in 2003 or four. That was in New York City at Barbara Gladstone Gallery, and I think the title of the show was Superficial Engagement. Can you guys hear me? Good. Okay. Superficial Engagement, I believe. You can look it up. But in that show, which was a very powerful sort of installation of objects, book pages, photographs, um, and the images were very graphic, um, uh, taken from the war at that time in Iraq, of very very violent and graphic images of you know, I mean, use your imagination, but people that had trans, trans transitioned or were killed. And so at that point in my life, I was a new father. My daughter was about a year. And obviously, there was a lot of tension and struggle around sort of her entering the world at that point during a war, or being born during the war. So I was kind of like doing a lot of work or thinking a lot about like that, obviously. So when I entered into this exhibition, I found that it was kind of difficult to really sort of engage like the graphic content. So I kind of went to the edge. Instead of leaving, I just walked in and I kind of went to the edge and within the installation, and hopefully y'all will look it up. I came across like these book pages, and it was from Emma Kuntz's first book. She was a Swedish untrained artist who was of Swedish heritage and born into a family of basket weavers, and did these drawings that, again, what I responded to is that there was like this aspect of like thinking about healing, or she felt that her work had the power to heal. And so like that was something that I kind of, that's one of those like big moments, like that kind of stay with you. And so I was like, wow, that's something that I think that I would be sort of, or I think that I want to produce work that is, uh, you know, close to that. All right. So, and Carmen Herrera was an artist that actually was introduced to me by a student of mine. Um, uh, it, believe it or not, it it can happen that students can introduce professors to things. Obviously, we all bring, our all the stuff that we bring to these engagements that we're having with one another. So it's not always like one way. So he thought that I would be interested in this work based upon the work that I was doing at that point. I believe this was in like 2010 or 11. Um, and so I went into this work, and Carmen Herrera was somebody that I again feel that there's a kinship in so far as like not just like visually, um, the relationship between this work, and I think that the work that I'm producing, but also just like in spirit. Uh, so I think a lot about like, hippy dippy, trippy concepts like vibration and energy. Obviously, I talked about spirituality, um, and again, healing. And I feel that this work is really powerful, healing. I like to say that art keeps us young, yeah, but art can also like extend, our existence if we, buy into it um, enough. And Carmen Herrera, I believe, died at the age of 106. Some of y'all know this. Some of y'all may not know this. But Louise Bourgeois, who's also a favorite artist of mine, also lived to be, I believe, 95 or 96. Yeah, both women artists, both, you know, uh, powerful, visual. Um, Sam Gilliam was a really important artist, and I sort of include this image or these images of paintings from the early 1960s because they sort of approximate a sort of way that I work graphically, like the rays sort of shooting out from a point on the plane, the picture plane, and um, creating like this sense of um, energy. Louise Nevelson. Need I say more? No, I'm joking. I love Louise Nevelson. Uh, like I said, I started out like, and still consider myself a sculptor, um, obviously. But again, that's gonna. I'm putting it that way to be a little bit provocative, hoping that someone will challenge me um, to expand upon that a little bit further. Um, I think we have at least one person in the room that will. Beatrice. We had a discussion earlier. But Louise Nevelson, man, just magic. Yeah, magic. I believe in magic. I believe in power. I believe in energy. I believe in love and light. And most importantly, Justice, justice. Yeah. And I believe that she embodies all of those things. You're not going to find that in a history book. Maybe you could, but maybe not. Quotes of G's Ben. I was first introduced to this work in the early 90s. I believe a show that I saw when I was first in New York after graduating from my MFA program at the Whitney Museum. And this is for those of you that don't know, and of course you can look into this further. It's a little hamlet of quilt makers on the Alabama River. I think it's Bessemer, Alabama. And, so a lot of this work is like, um, I think they're still making the quilts, and um, and I selected works that are like that have prominent geometric abstraction. So um, Alexander Radchenko, or Russian constructivism. Um, uh, Radchenko also was a graphic designer, but he was criticized apparently for um, uh, his interest in formalism, uh, and consider myself to be a bit of a formalist in how I approach work. So the image on the left is one that again like implies energy, like the words. I don't know what they say, but they're being projected in a very graphic way. Um, the image on the right was it's not a constructivist image. It's just a poster that was in the style of Russian constructivism. But I include it because it, has the Black Power fist, which was used in um, recent movements, Black Lives Matter, and so on. So like this whole concept of like, like the way that things can be communicated through imagery in propagandistic or um, I wouldn't say commercial, but the word's not coming to me. But in this very sort of graphic way is, i.e., the poster or posters is of interest. If I'm talking too slow, just let me know. So, Emory Douglas, who's the minister, I believe he's still alive, and the Minister of Culture for the Black Panther Party, and um, uh, and the artist. And so uh, these works have uh, are very specific for me in terms of the way that he is utilizing again the this implied energy radiating from the figure out to the edge of the picture plane, um, where it's like cropped, but just the concept of like, you know, taking and trying to sort of like communicate ideas that are political and so on is something that is of interest. Um, these plank masks from Burkina Faso, and they're hard, sort of graphic. Uh, um, they're very graphic, very hard. And a lot of the symbols and a lot of the shapes are shapes that I think about in my work. I think about shapes. I think about geometry. I think about math. I'm not that great at math, but I think about like the power of like these forms and how they sort of like repeat across culture, across, you know, and can be sort of like um, interpreted in various ways. Circles, triangles, uh, X's are things that like I like to use in my work to speak to specific things. And again, if you're interested um, and engaged, you'll hopefully put me to the test. Music is something that's really important to me, especially jazz. I know that that sounds really cliche for an abstract um, artist to speak about jazz. I mean, historically, a lot have. In fact, one of my favorite living artists, Stanley Whitney, living painters, always talks about like um, music, but jazz and Miles Davis. I think I heard an interview with him where he said that he listens to Miles Davis's "Bitches Brew" like every day. I don't know if that's I mean, every day. I don't know if that's true, but um, taken at his word, um, um, you know, I'm not going to question it, but I like that album. I always talk to my students about that album, like it was Miles Davis's. I talk about Miles Davis, and I talk about um, uh, Kind of Blue and Bitches Brew as being two masterpieces by the same person, by the same artist, and like a relatively short span of time from I think 57 to 71. And so there's this like dramatic shift that occurs in that work that has resonance for me and power. But um, John Coltrane and Alice Coltrane, these two albums are also really important. Um, Coltrane, if you don't know, died in, I believe, like 67, cancer. Sometimes I get into these lectures and I forget dates. So if if you know the actual date, don't hold it against me. But I think it was 67 or 68. And then um, his wife, Alice Coltrane, produced this album, I believe, in 71. And um, so these are just very seminal works of art, of music. And so they're uh, albums that I return to over and over again. And when I'm in the studio working, I'm always listening to music. And so I think the titles sort of say as much as anything that I can say about them, other than if you don't know, you should listen, you know, but do yourself a favor. Albert Eiler was also a protege of John Coltrane, and he was, um, we have the same birth date, which is July 13, him 1936, me 1966. I also share the same birthday with MF Doom. So I just made a post about that on my Instagram. You can all follow me if you like, but if you don't want to follow me, that's fine. But he, really was pushing the limits of like um, sound, and it's work that I find like deeply spiritual, and I really connect to it. And I think that like he was like kind of one of these figures in the in music that was kind of polarizing. Like either you were like really into him or you weren't. I think that by the time he made this album, music is the healing force of the universe. Like again, that title says a lot. Yeah. Um, uh, you don't have to believe or buy into that, but like for me, like there's a real power and resonance in like the notion of like suggesting it, you know, going back to say like Emma Kuntz, you don't have to believe it. But for me, that was like a real sort of pivotal point in my development as a maker, that you can just like, it's almost like Bruce Nauman saying, or Duchamp, like putting the urinal on the wall and calling it art. It's like, what is art? What can you suggest is art? And how is it, or how can you approach what it is that you determine that you need to make? You know what I mean? There's a real freedom and kind of beauty in that, if you think about it. Like if you think that art is like just like this kind of, if you think of art in like these singular, like very rigid ways, then I would invite you to sort of question that. Yeah. And and I would expand that by saying you can kind of, when you think about it, you can make whatever you want to make. It's all good. All right. After school. That's for your teachers. Um, Working in painting, sculpture, and video, Gatson employs the tropes of repetition, accumulation, and wit to shape his social commentary through the appropriation of compression of multi-layered symbols. He entangles the power of these symbols and illustrates how they function in various spheres. That's by Erica Musakwa, who was out in Seattle. I always use this quote, and I always read the quote because I like the quote. All right. I think that it was a very sort of succinct way of describing in general. I said succinct, and then I said in general. uh, the work that I'm trying to do. I could expand upon that, and maybe I will, but um, I won't. So this is the first painting that I made that I think I considered like, again, I was a sculptor who paints, you know, sculptor first, studied sculpture at the Yale School of Art, and, and really consider myself an object, a person that thinks objectively uh, in three dimensions. And but this piece, I at some point, I think it's 2004, so it's like that's 20 years. This piece was the first kind of painting that I made I that kind of mattered to me, like in some weird way. I still own this painting. Yeah, I would like for the painting to live in somebody's home, but I still have it. It's titled Southern Comfort. Um, it's got this very sort of Albers esque feel, and sort of how those uh, arrows or chevrons are laid out. And so, like at this point in my career, as I was trying to sort of bridge this chasm between painting and sculpture, I felt that I needed to sort of do something that wasn't purely paint, but wasn't purely object. I was thinking about like, uh, you know, code, coding, or uh, coded language or symbols. And so, like, Underneath the stripes that are purple and orange and red are these little like dots that I made. So again, like I'm thinking about coding, I'm thinking about like, you know, uh, not so much from the standpoint of computing. There was a book that I was reading at the time, a very slightly dense book, academic book called African Fractals. If you have the wherewithal to write that down, you can. It was sort of unpacking a lot of what I'm attempting to describe insofar as like coding, coded language of mathematics, uh, and I still don't know what a fractal is, uh, other than the self-referential and recursive elements. But it was like comparing like indigenous design and African design, and computing or mathematics. So anyway, all of that is to say that I made this piece titled Southern Comfort. Underneath the stripes is the layout of the Confederate flag. And I don't know if it's successful. I don't know that it matters if that it's successful. I still own the piece. So, um, and fast forward from 2004 to 2009, I did this piece titled Nigeria Power. And I was again thinking about like uh, various ways that like symbols can function, i.e., the shape. That's an octagon, which is also like the shape of a stop sign. But then you have like these rays sort of expanding out from this central form, which is, as the title suggests, the country Nigeria, which was played which was a country that played a significant part in the Atlantic or Triangle slave trade. And so I was kind of like more musing than I was trying to make a specific statement about that in this piece. When I was at Yale, I took a really important course by a great professor, um, Emily de Brugarde, and she she taught a course called African film, and we watched a lot of films, and we thought a lot about film and film theory, and um, and that was a really impactful course for me. Uh, we looked at filmmakers Usman Simbin. We looked at this ethnographic filmmaker John Marshall. Suffice to say, fast forward. That's 91. And in 2011, I had the occasion of having a mid-career survey at the age of 45. And at Exit Art Gallery, which is no longer around. And I think it was a final sort of solo exhibition that they did with in their 30-year, at that point, 30-year history. Um, and my African film professor came to the show. She ended up buying this piece, so she lives with this piece now. So that's another example of like professor student engagement. Okay. In 2007, I had to, I'm not going to give the backstory because maybe I'll give the backstory. But I started this series of works on paper that were essentially the same. They had very limited sort of parameters in that they were drawn on paper um, with collage. And the title came later, Icons, on the occasion of an exhibition that I did at the Studio Museum in Harlem that comprised of this work. So the work just kind of started out as a way of doing something in contrast to how I had been thinking about what it is that I do. So, um, which is essentially like they're color pencil on paper, watercolor paper with figure at the center. And the figure can move around, as you'll see, uh, on either side of the page. But I had a pretty like specific again, set of parameters that I set for myself. Um, and they were like, I considered this work like a celebration of the energy of the individual being depicted, but also like um, a memorialization of them. It's something that occurred, like, I don't know how I arrived, and there's maybe one or two where the figure is not black and white. I did one of Thelonious Monk, who that was a color image. Um, and but the idea that if any of you watch the show Big Brother, you know that whenever somebody's like eliminated, they their picture goes from color to, y'all can admit it. Some of y'all watch Big Brother. The image goes from color to black and white, meaning that they've transitioned out of the house. So like this predates that for me. Um, I wasn't doing it because of that, but there is this idea of like trying to take and sort of like do something again, like trying to provide reverence to these figures, utilizing like this very specific graphic energy, like their energy going into the world, and so on. So, and the titles of the piece usually are the names of the person, and they span, music. They span culture, um, music, literature, uh, politics, and so on. Most often, African or African American. Um, I've done many. I'd say there's probably like 300 of these in the world now. Uh, I think they're all sold, and I'm very proud about that. I'm proud of that. Yeah. Money and art is messy. Money is messy in general, but you need money to survive. And this project became my bread and butter. Yeah. Donald Judd talked, who is it? Is it Donald Judd that talked about his bread and butter? I used to work for Richard Serra, but Richard would make the drawings, and that was like his bread and butter. That's how he kind of survived, because the sculptures were very big. If you don't know who Richard Serra is, you can write it down and look it up. But I suspect since we're all in art school, I mean, one of the most important um, sculptors of the last century, this in the last century. So the idea was, is after they died, I would like, if I had a engagement with them and their energy, I would make a portrait. So Sidney Poitier died in 2022. They don't always correspond with the year. Cicely Tyson, also 2022, and this piece is in the National Museum of History and Culture in D.C. National African American Museum of History and Culture in D.C. Don Cherry. By the way, I showed examples of jazz musicians, but my musical tastes are pretty expansive. It's not just jazz, but I love jazz, and I think a lot about jazz. I think a lot about time. I couldn't play an instrument to save my life. I can bang on the guitar, but y'all wouldn't want to listen to that. But I think a lot about music. I think a lot about time. I think a lot about um, texture and things that relate. So this is, as described earlier, the just some installation shots of the works at the Student Museum in Harlem. Um, and this was the last exhibition that they did before they closed the museum for their big renovation. And I think they're opening pretty soon, uh, like this month, October. So I was really like honored to do this exhibition of these drawings, because the drawings, like I attempted to describe, started out as something that was that I wasn't super sure about or convinced of, but then I started making them. And similar to what I was describing about my mom's reaction to that first drawing, like people started to respond to these, and I was like encouraged by that. I mean, that sounds a little superficial, but whatever it takes to get it done. And so I kept producing them, and I had a little like agreement with myself that at the point that they became formulaic, too formulaic, that I would stop. And I kept trying to sort of end it, but then I would be inspired, or someone else would pass that, inspired me. So I kept going. And I, but so that was like 2007 when it started, and this was 2017. We're now in 2025, and I think I'm done. I haven't felt the inspiration to produce anymore, so I think it's done. But there is a curator, a friend, who asked me to produce some for a show, forthcoming show. So we'll see what happens. All right. How much time do we have? We good? Sometimes I like to talk slow. 20 minutes? Oh, I said I was going to be 45 minutes. This always happens. Power Lines. This is a show that I did in 2016 at Samson Projects in Boston. They are no. I'm going to talk fast. Don't run away. Anyway, so Samson Projects, it's a great space. This guy Camilo Alvarez, who's a friend, and I kind of show this this or included this because I like to talk about like the importance of relationships, particularly in the art world. Me and Camilo had started speaking about the potential of doing a show like 10 years prior to the show actually opening. So it took 10 years to actually make that happen for whatever reason. Yeah. So sometimes things start as a little kernel, and then maybe they eventually happen. For whatever reason, we just kind of like stayed in the mix. But I will also say that this show is important because it's it's a point of like uh, it indicates a time that I was like kind of becoming really more confident about some of the things that I was sort of working through, some of the forms, sort of really embracing like this idea of trying to make something specific, i.e., these paintings, these panels that I think of as paintings, but they're kind of bridging like the space between like a painting and a sculpture. Yeah. And not to brag, but this image um, ended up, this one actually ended up on the cover of the Boston Globe um, as a review of the show. So, and these are, again, like I think of the work that I produce, the paintings, if you will, now, similarly to what I was describing with um, Emma or Helma, that they're kind of, they come to me, like I would say that like as visions, and that is designed to be provocative. Um, and so that there's an automatic part of that, but like I see myself as a conduit, sort of receiving this from wherever, the ancestors, the master, I don't know, but they come through me and into the world. So I don't really question that. And I think that this is the first now as much. I think this is the first sort of like example of me sort of like allowing or being open to that. Um, so I didn't explain that well, but whatever. This piece is again, it's titled Throne. I still own that piece and this piece. I think they're great, but these were also kind of like these sort of sculptural um, memorializations of people that mattered to me in my life, and uh, and I like the idea of trying to, again, make something that was painted. Uh, um, an object that was painted rather than a painting. So that wasn't explained well, but this piece, Untitled Three Diamonds, incorporates collage, um, three images, three diamonds. The image on the left is a group of, can you guys see that? Yeah, it's a group of women in a field uh, picking cotton. Um, Watch riot, scene from the Watch riots, and the scene from a rally for Huey Newton, I believe. A famous photo from '69 in front of the courthouse in California, Northern Cal. This piece is in uh, the Harvard Business School now. I'm not giving dimensions, but it's this big. This is a piece that was kind of like in the vein of how I was working, utilizing like a very specific color palette at the time. Um, it's sort of inspired by like, you know, Pan African, Pan African palette, color palette, you know, Black nationalist, um, and beyond. So, and I was kind of playing with text through some works. This is just an installation view of a show that I did in 2018, um, which was the second iteration of these panels, shown in a specific way. I still make the panels. I'm like working on a group of the panels now, new ones. Um, they can be sort of experienced in a group. I like the group, or they can be experienced individually or standalone as standalone objects. The titles are just simply the panel and then the title. This piece I use, it's sort of a one-off kind of, but it's combining collage. And then I was like really wrapped up before this sort of like engagement with I think that Hank Willis Thomas and his organization, they were doing something called Wide Awakes, and but before this was like 2018, so it was a little bit before that. The eyes feel a little cartoony and silly, but I was thinking a lot about like, I was thinking about a lot of things, but like witness being one, history. Um, uh, so the images are. I was going down to Mississippi. Did a residency down there, and um, and I made a film uh, on the murder of Emmett Till, and uh, so I was spending a lot of time in Mississippi um, in that period. It's like 2016 to 2018, um, and that's a longer story. But so this piece was utilizing not just the eyes, but the triangles as a motif to speak to very sort of specific things for me, but also kind of universal. And I was projecting onto like collaging onto like these African masks. It's a little bit loaded and kind of provocative, uh, but the title comes from the image that is the upper right, which is literally the caption on the photograph. It was a found photograph of like, as described, a cotton planter and his pickers. So pickers being the people behind him who picked the cotton on his land in 1912, I believe. So it's a really powerful image, but I just wanted to sort of again embed it into the piece. Um, and then I started or was working on a series of, again, paintings that utilize like this sort of repeated uh, triangular forms. Again, thinking about energy, um, vibration, uh, and so on. Triangles. Triangles are powerful. Yeah. Uh, think about that. Maybe you'll have a question about the triangles at the end. 10 minutes. So most of these pieces, fortunately, are in the world in public and private collections. The titles suggest for me what the inspiration was, but they're just sort of like, a lot of times I'll wait till after I finish a piece to title it. Um, uh, Gil Scott, AKA Gil Scott Heron, last poet, uh, uh, musician, political activist, is somebody who is featured in the work in various sort of ways. Uh, so it was kind of a play on words. He coined the phrase bluesologist, yeah, to describe what it is that he did. Really important. So I was thinking about the color blue. I think a lot about blue, and sort of symbolically or metaphorically how things can sort of possess a certain kind of power. So it's like literally like blue, but in contrast to the sort of target forms in the center of the triangles, which are also figures. Does that make sense? So whenever you see triangles, you can also project onto that. Can I just use the cursor? Yeah, perfect. Figures. This is a second iteration of a piece titled, untitled North Star. A lot of times I like to untitle and then put a title in parentheses. And then I did a series of flag paintings in 2020 when we were like mostly in lockdown. Black lives, uh, a lot of the things that like are persisting, you know, um, uh, politically speaking, um, with in our great country. So I was thinking about the flag at that point. I'm still thinking about the flag, but I'm not making these paintings anymore. Um, uh, and thinking about jazz. So you'll see things that reappear. Um, Untitled Love Supreme. Untitled Universal Unconscious or Universal Consciousness after Alice Coltrane. Untitled Expansive Light Consciousness. Um, Young Mystics 2. Quarter Moons. And then this is a show that I did in 2022. That summer, I, I, two things happened. I learned of a friend that got really sick, great artist, Alicia Henry, who passed away a year ago this month, in October. Great artist. Write that down. You should write that down. She's really amazing. Um, was and then I also learned a few weeks after opening a show in Birmingham, Alabama, at the Birmingham Museum, that my younger brother, who was 10 years younger than me, had passed. So in the formation of the show, I was kind of thinking about like, you know, uh, death. I was kind of grieving, still am, mourning. And again, back to the whole concept of like things passing through you, and just sort of trying to be open to that energy, or to just trying to be open. Um, this painting came to me like in a kind of waking vision. One morning I woke up and I had realized that I had dreamt like these key like forms, and immediately, I mean, wouldn't say immediately, but that day I went to the studio and laid it out and made it into a painting. And um, so it's kind of inspired by like that energy. And then I titled the show after that. This is unlight un, untitled Expansive Light Consciousness. And it's really, these pieces are kind of after Alice Coltrane, Luminous Bodies, uh, Triple Consciousness, Franz Fanon. I did a piece that you'll see titled Untitled Double Consciousness after W.E.B. Du Bois' concepts. This piece is in the National Museum of African American History and Culture as well. Now, it's supposed to be on display in an exhibition that I'm not sure is going to happen. Untitled Malcolm in the Spirit. The predominant form in this piece is EX, but I'm also doing a lot of circles. Magic Star. These are mostly either 36 by 40, 36 by 80 or 36 by 48. And then these panels. I'm going to blast through this. This is my last show at Miles McKinney Gallery 1 year ago, September. It was titled Above and Below, after the concept, as above, so below. And my public projects, which in 2018, 2017, I was invited by the MT Arts and Design to, in a competition, to make a proposal for a subway station in the Bronx at 167th Street on the Grand Concourse. And I think I ran into somebody who was also on that jury, that was being considered for that, and he was reminding me of how packed that like meeting, the first meeting that we had with the artists. It was a lot of artists, and it was like very competitive. So suffice to say, I won the commission. Very happily won, but it's a lot of work. But I decided to sort of through through the through the prodding and vision of a close friend, Letha Wilson. I was like, after the meeting, I came back. And this speaks to community and the importance of community. Like you guys, you're classmates, but you're also community. And I don't live, but I have my studio on the floor with other artists. And so coming back with all of these, like thinking about what I would do, I said something to her, and she's being as brilliant as she is. She's like, you should make those drawings. You should blow those drawings up. I was like, what? I never thought about that. And so I did a projection, and I was like, I think that could work. But being the literal person that I am, I didn't realize I could get rid of like those sections that divide the image. So I just worked around them. So I was like, okay, I'll just extend the rays through there so that you'd have to imagine the rays going through that. But as it turns out, I could remove that, but I left it, and I kind of like the way that it worked out. So it's eight portraits of, as described, folks prominent from or have had an impact on the Bronx and beyond. So it was Justice Sonia Sotomayor, Maya Angelou, Audre Lorde, Gil Scott Heron, James Baldwin, and Celia Cruz, who I believe is born in, or not born, but buried in the Bronx. But and then last year I did a project as a result of a mural that I did at the Birmingham Museum of Art. Um, uh, the board of the Birmingham Airport saw the mural in the museum and asked if I would make the mural for the Birmingham Airport. So well, this is the Birmingham, sorry, this is a museum. This is the museum version. So it was in the lobby, and across from it, there was a portrait that was an abstract portrait of Sun Ra, Herman Blunt, who's from Birmingham. So I like the contrast between like this, um, the figuration in this portrait of the Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, who was prominent in the civil rights movement in the 60s um, in Birmingham, um, also known as or referred to as Birmingham and the Magic City, which I like. Um, but his house was bombed twice, I think. Uh, and then they moved to Cincinnati. Then, oh, and then last year I did this as described in Michelle's introduction. I was invited to propose a temporary installation at New York Penn Station called Untitled Collective Light Transfer, and it was installed throughout like 2 city blocks in New York, between I think 8th and 10th, in the rotunda of Penn Station and the concourse. This is the Birmingham Airport, which is just this is like the largest mural to date. I think it's like 88 by whatever 30. No, I don't know the dimensions. It's big and prominent. And we spent two weeks with the install. We were behind the wall, temporary wall, and we had, um, since we were in like the secure areas, we had to be escorted into the wall. And everywhere we went in that space, we were escorted by a guard. He had to hang out with us for 2 weeks. So we became really good friends. Um, we also had a lift. So if you, very small airport, if you walk to the left of the image, there's a Hank Willis Thomas video installation permanently installed. And then beyond that, there's Chick-fil-A. So every day at lunch, Chick-fil-A in the South, I don't know, maybe here too, is really popular. So every day there'd be a line. So prior to lunch, we would be up on the lift and we'd look and see if there's a line to choose when we're gonna go get our Chick-fil-A. I didn't eat the sandwiches every day for 2 weeks. We would get the salad and then we'd switch it occasionally and go to Burger King. But it's kind of surreal to like spend like that much time in an airport, you know? Like I can't really sort of expand on that, but it's kind of surreal because everybody's going. It's like very transient, but like you're kind of staying while they're going. I don't know. That's all I have to say about that. All right, that's another view, and they still have those stanchion in front of it. The person that's the president who actually invited me to propose was flying out just like 3 or 4 days ago, and he was like, um, he snapped a picture, texted it to me, said, "Your beautiful piece is still there." And then I was struck by the fact that they still have those stanchions in front of it. I don't think they're ever going to move them. Like I was like, they still have those things there. He's like, yeah, they don't want any to encourage anyone coming up and touching the wall. I'm like, I left y'all with like lots of white paint. It was funny because it was funny because it was like kind of like hidden for like that period of time before they unveiled it, which was like a big thing, including Reverend Shuttlesworth's family and a lot of media. It's like this really like sort of dramatic thing, and they had a curtain that when they announced it, they like hit a button and the curtain dropped. I was like, wow, and it was like this, but it was like all the workers at the airport, they would, because they were all curious about what was happening. So they would kind of get in behind the wall. And I would get these comments from the guy that was our handler. He'd say, they don't understand what the big deal is with the stripes. Like, can anybody make those stripes? And then there was the painter who was the painter for the airport. He was like this kind of cool cat with the hat turned to the side. And he came in one day. He's like, I don't know what they're making fun about. But like, to paint those stripes like that, that's hard. And I was like, it was actually hard to do because it's a lot of tape. And I painted. I worked with my assistant, who's now at the Tyler School of Art, Marta Murray. I have to give her props because she really helped. She helped in the Birmingham piece, and we did another piece together. But and plus the wall was they built that wall. The wall was curved. They had to put the wall in, so it was a little tricky to get it right. At some point, we did look at it, and we were like from the side, and like the lines were kind of wavy. We had to fix that. So it was like it's not easy to paint that long spans with tape and paint, two people, but we did it. And there it is, supposedly permanently. Um, that's it.
Thank you so much, Rico, for sharing your work with us and making us understand that it's possible to bridge between sculpture and painting. So now we open up the floor for questions. Um, if you have questions, please raise your hand and I will get the microphone right to you. I know we have questions.
Some of those pieces have like glitter embedded in the paint.
Yeah.
And could you speak to your employment of that as like the textural element to it, in addition to sort of flat painting?
Yeah, I mean, this the bit that I can say about that, but I'll just say that I started using glitter in the paintings, not represented in in this slide presentation, in 2006, I believe, 2007. And I like the glitter. I mean, glitter was kind of popular, especially like that heavy flake stuff, you know, uh, during that moment in art history. A lot of people were using glitter. Um, I just liked it because of like one that it sort of implies like, you know, space, yeah, sky, dark sky, stars. But then like it became something that was less about that, and I also like the that it was a material that was used. It's mostly used in craft. It's like, there's like a lo-fi sort of aspect to glitter. I kind of like this idea of like utilizing, like people would always come in and say, for instance, like instead of using the glitter, why don't you use like, didn't Warhol use like diamond dust? And I was like, I don't see myself as a diamond dust type of person. Do you know what I mean? I like the lo-fi quality, but then it became something that as I began to, you know, understand it, I determined that I wanted to sort of mute it and make it like more about texture than about the shimmery sparkliness of it. So now it's just the texture, and the texture to me approximates things, approximates hair, not literally black hair. It's like asphalt. I did a series of paintings. It was on the Watch Riot. So I was thinking a lot about like, urban settings and asphalt. Um, but it's just the texture. It's just something. It's just a way of sort of like, it's always black. It's never a different color. It's always like the glitter is painted in black paint. So I'm like painting the glitter. I put it down. So, but it's just like the texture, and it gives like a little bit of a break from like the flatness of the paintings. So there's something physical. It's about presence. So it's like one of those things that I can't really like explain like why I keep using it, other than like I feel like I still feel attached to it, long after like the trendiness of it. And there's something about like kind of like I think that's probably like a part of my personality that is a little bit stubborn, but so I like to stay with stuff for a long time. Yeah, it's not so much to bend it to my will, but it's just I feel committed to it. Now, people always say, "Well, what?" The worst thing that people would say about the glitter was that like it was like grip tape, you know, like oh, it's grip tape, you know. I I can't control your read. Do you know what I mean? So, but I can try to work to make it feel like something other than that. And I suppose that that's the thing that kind of compels me to continue. It's like I can not bend it to my will again, but make it so that it's convincing. Make a convincing argument about it, such that it doesn't become a question. But happy to answer the question.
Any other question?
Hey, y'all, don't be shy. Don't be shy. The only opportunity you're ever going to have to talk to me here. I mean, maybe, hopefully not, but go ahead.
Hi, thanks for the enjoyable presentation. You were talking about, I think your phrase was objects with paint on them in connection with the thrones and the panels, power lines, right? I wonder if you could say a little bit more about whether maybe as a sculptor, it's important for you to have made the object to which you apply the paint, or do you think you might be interested in applying paint to some object you found or that somebody else made or whatever?
Yeah, I've probably thought about like that and other things. I mean, it's like, like again, like I have like a very sort of um I don't want to say unsophisticated because but like I set up like sort of like rules, if you will. I mean, even though I don't necessarily like rules in the way that I'm going to describe this, but like I have to set up parameters maybe for how I want to work on something. So like to your question, it was important to sort of like make the objects. And in the case of those objects, one of the things that I was kind of involved with that I didn't describe was like trying to repurpose materials. So those pieces, as well as some other things, were made of materials that were like being discarded that I kind of saved from the dumpster. And so like this idea of trying to like create something where I'm elevating it, like it was going to be trash. I mean, obviously you can get into all the politics of like waste and all of that, which I'm not going to, but I think y'all know where I'm going with this. Yeah. So I wanted to, so for me, it's about like trying to take something in this really humble way and trying to elevate it. So it's not like a joke, like, haha, it's kind of like, you know, um, it has to do with like how we ascribe value. I still own those pieces. I love those pieces. I've shown those pieces and like there was a show at Speroni Westwater Gallery in New York. This is a big gallery. They had those pieces. The curator was like, "We're going to sell these pieces," and I still own them. But but they hold some value to me based upon what they represent for me. Um, Um, so, but have I thought about taking existing? I have, but it just never really made it to a point where I felt so inspired to do it that I did it. You understand? Does that make sense? Yeah.
So still on the topic of value,
Yeah.
you showed the plank marks from Burkina Faso, and that is made by the Mwa people. And so I was wondering, it's called the Watete. So I was wondering if you include any spirituality in your pieces, and how do you also think about color in selection of color? Because I'm seeing more like primary colors, less of tertiary, and I'm seeing, because I'm African, I'm also seeing more of African flags in there. So I'm much more interested to know about how you think about color and the conceptuality of spirituality actually in your
Yeah.
work.
So like color to me, or well, no, okay, spirituality and thinking specifically about like, African or indigenous or like um, origin, like one of the difficult parts of of my past, my family's past is like, and I think it's consistent throughout. There's all sorts of like questions around like, you know, uh, where we're from. And I started out in college. I mean, here, not here, but when I was your age, trying to produce work that was about, um, origin, um, where you're from. And I knew that there was a lot of inaccess to that in my own family's history, like being like descendants of slaves. So I began to sort of make up, like, the story. Yeah. So for me, like expanding out a little bit to and speaking quickly about it to where I'm at, I think that like I try to uh, since then and continuing to this day, I try to give myself a license to make things rooted or associated with other things in the world, but not specifically about that thing. So it becomes like kind of inspiration. Like those masks, yeah, but so yes, spirituality, but spirituality for me is both specific and it's kind of like, you know, uh, a license to sort of like to talk about that in non-specific ways. Does that make sense? It's kind of like the Emma Kuntz uh, concept, which is probably rooted in something very specific, but the idea that you can like take something and utilize that to kind of like speak to something. So, that may or may not be, actually, so that's like the artistic license that I want to try to give myself. Does that sound too shallow? I mean, so like, so yeah, so all of that is there and then some. It's like if you were to sort of like kind of try to create something that's from other stuff, like what would it look like? It's like hip hop. It's like if you take and you sample. So sampling is kind of like, would be a good term. So like, so I think I'm really involved in like this kind of sampling, but I'm also interested in like another sort of music term, like riffing on things. So there's like the kind of riff, like you're kind of approximating, which, and I'm trying to put this in a way that's like as reverent as I can make it, but, and I'm not trying to be like slippery or elusive in answering, but I think that there's kind of like something important about uh, allowing oneself that kind of license to play. But I don't mean like play like not serious, but just to kind of like, in other words, you can. I once heard Bruce Nauman, I think it was on R21, you know, playfully sort of say that, what did he say? How did he put it? He said it's art. He said it like this: it's art because I say so. It's kind of like the Duchampian notion of like art, but I say so. Which again is not to sound irreverent and it's not to sound elusive, but I like that kind of like sort of giving oneself a license to do something, you know. But a lot of times people will say things to you like, um, your work looks like Odile Odita. I love Donald Odile. But
Thank you.
but I'm saying like, I would say to that in response to that, look closer. But I never say it.
Last question.
Come on, one student question. Don't be shy.
Okay.
It's fine.
I mean, I think I could project from here, but
Okay.
so just, oh, okay. So, like, so real quick, it's a simple question, but you said you started off as a sculptor and transitioned into painting. What was that experience for you like towards the beginning of your career? And now that you are well established, how do you look back at that time?
So starting out sculpture, transitioning. Is that the question? Yeah. Again, like I try to I try not to sort of get too bogged down in like the specificity of like, whatever that journey was, whatever the movement was. I mean, maybe in a way that I did then. So it was challenging. It was challenging. But again, I don't think that I left. I'm still a sculptor. I still, I still think about like all of the ways that I've worked, like in video, like digital image production, photography. Um, Even if I'm mostly making paintings that I refer to as painted things, that could also be expanded to painted objects. So I'm still thinking very specifically about, um, physical objects in space. My body, I play sports, football. I mean, we're at Penn State. Y'all are number 3 in the nation right now. Great football team. So I play football. And so I think about like, I think in a very physical sense. I'm not small. I'm not tall, but I'm not, I'm here. I'm present physically. So, but there's a kind of like, I had to sort of, my really hardcore friends who are sculptors would say, "You're not a painter." Now it kind of hurt my feelings a little bit, but I was determined to continue. I was stubbornly to continue to work, and and so I think at a certain point I just said, okay, forget about the labels, forget about constraints, just do, and like that's it, just make, and everything else will fix itself. And so I think about that not just in terms of like not sort of being confined by the disciplines, but in terms of like just producing. Yeah. Like I always tell students, like or I even said this to some friends: don't make for. I don't make for the thing. I don't make for the show. I just make. So I'm always involved in just making, and so that for me is the key to sort of like addressing whatever issues there are that come up a lot with artists. Uh, like artists always want. They always want to have. They always want, or they're sort of confused by like how to get the thing. But I just say like make it. It's almost like build it and they will come. You just kind of have to build it. You have to sort of like have enough sort of courage, and you have to have enough sort of conviction. And if that's the case, I mean, I didn't say confidence, but if that's the case, then you know, it's like manifesting. You can like do whatever you want from that. So it's like take the drawings. I just kind of started those out with like, like a different motivation that I didn't describe. And um and one thing led to the other. And then 10 years later I had a survey of the drawings at a major institution, you know. I'm not bragging. And I didn't plan on that. It just happened, you know. It's like I'm also not bragging. Having a major sort of installation at New York Penn Station, I don't even know how that happened. It just put my head down and looked up, and I was like, "Wow, it's here." Um, I'm joking. I know how it happened. It was a lot of work, kind of painful. But the point is that like if you don't sort of think about the limitations, like of being confined by a specific thing, then there's the potential that you can like sort of do whatever, and then just call yourself whatever you want to call yourself. You know, today I'm a lecturer. I'm joking. Maybe not, 'cause by the looks of some of your faces. Um, but I'm mostly happy to be here. I'm mostly happy to answer. I would like, before I leave, one student to ask a question. Okay, never mind. Never mind. Color. How do you choose your color palette? Um, uh, Very carefully. I think I already answered that question. How do you like teaching? I love it. Do you like your students? Yes, I do. I love my students. I feel inspired by my students. Yes. Do you ever call on students? Yes. Are you going to do that today? No. There's no, there's, oh, look, it worked.
Different like historical figures. And I think you spoke about how some of them you did them when they had recently passed away, but I just wanted to know how you chose the ones that you did when, you know, you just feel like it. You're like, oh, I've been thinking about this person that was important to my journey, and you just produced it, or were you strictly doing it based on like relevance in like the modern day?
Yeah, I think about, again, I think about like, I'm looking at mostly Black cultural figures. Um, I mean, I think that describes it, like music, literature, politics. And then to answer specifically what you asked, yeah, there are people that are important to me, like, stuff that I've read, stuff that, music that I've listened to. Um, so they've had an impact on me a lot of times. So it's like paying an homage, if you will, to like um, their energy. But the work is not designed to tell you everything about them. It's kind of like the work expanding into the mosaics. All I would like is for the people that utilize that space to sort of experience that work in real time, and maybe, but not necessarily. It's not necessarily the case that they will be inspired to sort of go beyond and figure out for themselves who they are, if you will. Do you know what I mean? So that's always like the hope. But I'm not the type of person, obviously, that's gonna, you know, take you to the water and like make you drink. You know what I mean? I'll be like, if you want to drink, you can have a drink. So, but they are important to me. They've had an impact on my sort of journey, my life, my the way that I like think about the world, and my worldview. Um, they're heroes. I didn't say that, but typically when I give these lectures, I talk about like the original impetus was that I was trying to sort of produce like this work about these people, these portraits who have felt like kind of superheroes to me. I mean, as the title describes in the public project, they're kind of like beacons, like lights, you know what I mean? Like that, it's like light goes in and, you know, goes out and comes in, you know what I mean? It's both directions, but so yeah, light is something that I think about a lot if it's not obvious. The radiating, the energy, illumination, you know, um, being illuminated, and I don't always think of it as being like so easily processed as like, your work is about joy. It's about happiness. It's just about like, I think, I hope that it's about like an opportunity to sort of, think in a more expansive way, or to think about the expansive ways that the figure that's being depicted thought about, what it means to kind of be here. Yeah. I mean, like here on this earth, like, so there's a kind of beauty in that that is sort of resonant or consistent in like how I try to process. And hopefully you've experienced the work is beautiful. I think that beauty is really important. You know, I think I heard somebody, to qualify that a little bit more. I think that I heard like somebody from Doctors Without Borders talk about like the beauty and tragedy, and that was something that had resonance. So it's not just beauty, like, oh, a pretty flower. Like, I'm thinking about the complexity of all of the ways in which sort of we have to be here. I just happen to be like, and I don't mean this in a limited way. I'm African and American, or American and Black. and all of those things are very important to who I am. But I don't want to force feed you to having to think about that. And I think that like sort of open conversation and dialogue is really important. And hopefully I inspire that. But if I don't, I'll keep working at it.
Thank you so much, Rico.
I was trying to go into one. Trying to get, I don't want y'all to get shortchanged, but thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.